The late 90s were a mixed bag of experimentation for video games. You had some games that stuck to standards set in the previous generation, and others that dove headfirst into the Wild West of 3D. Most people remember the greats, like Super Mario 64, and they tend to forget about the overabundance of trash 3D platformers like Blasto or Glover. Spyro the Dragon, however, is one that is beloved by fans across the globe, and the original trilogy is seeing a remake later this year. This news got me itching to try the original for my first time, and to see what all the hubbub is about. Is it worth going back to play the PS1 version 20 years later? Or has that fire-breathing dragon been extinguished? Let's find out on Nostalgia or Not. The story of Spyro begins with a film crew interviewing one of the eldest dragons of the 6 worlds. The director questions the elder dragon about Nasty Nork. We don't know who this guy is, but another dragon chimes in with the deets, and he ends the interview by calling Nork an ugly wimp. Somehow, Nork hears this all the way from his castle and uses his magic staff to transform the dragons into crystals. Nork's actions clearly fall under the talk crap, get smacked rules. So all the dragons are now encased in crystal forever. Well, except for one, our hero Spyro. I actually like the silliness of the story, and while it's not an epic tale, there are a lot of funny interactions between Spyro and the dragons that kept me smiling throughout the game.
Who are you again?
I'm out of here.
And the story wastes no time getting you into what you're really here for, the gameplay. Spyro must travel through the 6 worlds as you try and free 80 dragons from their stony prisons, recover the 12 dragon eggs, and get back the 14,000 stolen gems. It's a true collectathon. Spyro has a few different abilities to help him release his bound brethren. He can charge and smash through enemies and treasure chests with his horns, he can jump and glide, and of course he can breathe fire. Standard dragon stuff. You control his movements with the D-pad, and I found it a bit tricky to get the hang of it at first, as people now are more familiar playing a 3D platformer with an analog stick. In these types of 3D games, you'll also need to adjust the camera angles to get a better view of your next path. Spyro gives the option of an automatic or a manual camera. I did not like the auto camera, and it even got me a little motion sick, so I switched to the manual. It was better, although this was before the days of dual analog sticks, so you have to rotate it with the L2 and R2 buttons. It's pretty unwieldy and outdated, but I guess I got used to it. 4 out of the 6 levels in each world are large 3D spaces filled with baddies to beat and collectibles to find. The platforming is too simple, and it never really challenges you, though there are these fun moments where you have to charge and launch off ramps, and glide to areas you previously thought were out of your reach. Battling enemies is entertaining. I really love charging and crashing through rows of minions and burning them up. It feels satisfying. Now the thing is, while the main levels can be enjoyable to explore, the shine soon fades as the game continues, because the focus seems to be on the gem count rather than platforming. The collecting gets very tedious, and many of the gems are just in plain sight. I was pretty gung-ho at first, making sure that I got every gem, but by World 4 I was sick of the mindless collecting and focused on nabbing all the dragons instead. Which, that wasn't a challenge either, as they were mainly on the direct path to exit the level. And as for the dragon eggs, those ended about halfway through the game. By World 3, there were no more to collect. What gives? It feels like this idea was tacked on, just like one of my biggest complaints, the boss levels. Most of the time, I didn't even realize I was fighting one. You would hit them once and they'd run away, and then you'd follow them and hit them again. It was pretty disappointing. And especially the fight with Nasty Nork himself. Chase him around, hit him twice, and he's a goner. The dragon in the beginning was right, he is a wimp. By the time I beat the game, I was very underwhelmed. I got all the dragons, all the eggs, and nearly all the treasure without breaking a sweat. Now I'm not saying every game needs to be difficult, but there was no sense of progression in Spyro. World 5 is just as easy as World 1. You could switch them and there would be no issue for a newbie. It never tested your skills as you learned the game. Along with the game difficulty never changing, you never learn any new abilities. So you do the same thing for 7 hours without adding any gameplay elements to switch it up. It gets pretty monotonous. For younger kids, this may be alright, but I think it would be difficult for a kid to get past the clunky controls, especially in these days. The only thing that does vary the gameplay is the flight levels. You have 30 seconds to fly through all the rings and destroy certain objects. It's a decent minigame, but not enough to hold my attention for long. I've expressed my disdain for PS1 and N64 era of graphics many times. Games that tried to look realistic now end up looking like a monstrosity. Spyro, however, has aged very well. Spyro in particular has a wonderful design, and he's highly detailed. The other dragons also look good. The truly impressive thing to me is the backgrounds and environments. In many early 3D games, you could barely see too far in front of you. The draw distance would be so short that objects and backgrounds only pop in as you approach them, like this clip from the horrible Fifth Element game. But in Spyro, you can clearly see enemies and objects in the distance. And a side note to something equally as impressive is the loading times. I remember having to wait so long back in the PS1 days for certain games to load. But Spyro goes from stage to stage so fast, and the time to save is even faster. Just step on a dragon's pedestal, talk to the fairy, and bam, it saves in seconds. Simple stuff like that keeps the flow of the game moving smoothly, so kudos to the developers for that. Now my only gripe with the graphics is that yes, there are a wide variety of enemies, but their designs are not as detailed as Spyro and are blocky and boring. Going hand in hand with the overall presentation is the soundtrack and voice work. The soundtrack was composed by Stuart Copeland, the drummer for The Police. I found that the music suited the levels, but I don't think it will be sticking with me. A lot of games that use voice actors during this time generally didn't have the best outcome.
Goldman! Do you know what you're doing?
But here I like the voices of the dragons, mainly because I think a majority of the 80 were done by a single guy putting on different voices. Spyro himself sounds a bit nerdy and kinda reminds me of Scrappy-Doo. A little guy who acts tough, and I think it's a great fit.
I'd rather flame the fools.
Now you're thinking.
In a time where 3D platformers were in their infancy, Spyro is better than most. But to put it simply, it's because that most were garbage. So where does Spyro stand 20 years later? So is the praise for Spyro the Dragon due to nostalgia or not? In this case, I'm gonna lean ever so slightly towards nostalgia, because there's no doubt in my mind that fans of the game rate it higher due to their nostalgia. As a new player, I found the game to be just okay. The graphics and sound have held up very nicely, but there's a real lack of progression in Spyro. And the clunky controls, the tedious nature of collecting gems, and the tacked-on boss battles stand in the way of it being a true classic. I will say that it did give me an interest in trying out the sequels, and especially the remake, with the hopes that my issues with this one have been fixed. What do you guys think about Spyro the Dragon? Are you nostalgic for it? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you disagree with my review, that's okay, because remember, it's all fun games. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you liked that video, why not check out some more episodes of Nostalgia or Not by clicking the link down below. And if you like It's All Fun and Games, then make sure to subscribe. Thanks again.